My name is Marilyn. I'm 36 years old, and right now, I'm standing in my Manhattan penthouse watching my sister Bethany have a complete meltdown in the lobby through security cameras. She's screaming about the $8 million I inherited, throwing papers everywhere, demanding to be let upstairs. For 36 years, I was invisible to my parents, the forgotten daughter who could never measure up to their golden child. But money has a funny way of making invisible people suddenly very visible. Before I begin this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt overlooked or undervalued by your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I finally found my worth. This journey from invisible daughter to millionaire is one you won't want to miss. So let's dive into how family favoritism created a fortune they'll never touch. Growing up as the invisible daughter shaped every moment of my childhood in ways that still haunt me today. I remember my 8th birthday like it was yesterday, sitting alone at the kitchen table with a store-bought cupcake while my mother frantically planned Bethany's upcoming 6th birthday party. When I reminded her it was my special day, she waved me off, saying Bethany's party needed to be perfect because more people would attend. That year, Bethany had a princess-themed celebration with 50 guests, a 3-tier cake, and a bounce house. I got a card they forgot to sign. School achievements became another painful reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. When I brought home straight A's and won the state science fair, my parents barely glanced at the certificate before returning to their conversation about Bethany's C+ in art class, which they called showing improvement. They framed her participation trophy from a dance recital she quit after 2 weeks, but stuffed my National Merit Scholarship letter in a drawer. By 14, I was working at the local grocery store after school because my parents said I needed to learn responsibility, while Bethany received a generous weekly allowance for simply existing. The college years brought the most crushing blow to my naive hope that things might change. After working myself to exhaustion to get into Yale, I rushed home with my acceptance letter. Tears of joy streaming down my face. My mother glanced at it briefly before saying, "That's nice, dear, but how will you afford it? We're saving for Bethany's education." When Bethany got accepted to community college 2 years later with a 2.3 GPA, they threw a party and invited the entire extended family. My graduation from Yale, where I'd earned summa cum laude while working 3 jobs, went unattended by my parents. They chose that weekend to take Bethany to Vegas because she was stressed from her first semester. The moment that shattered any remaining illusions about my place in the family came when I discovered the truth about my college fund. Throughout high school, my parents had promised that my grandmother's education fund would help with university costs. I'd been careful with money, saving every penny from my jobs, believing I had that safety net. 2 weeks before tuition was due, I learned they'd emptied the entire fund, $30,000, to pay for Bethany's wedding to her high school boyfriend. When I confronted them, shaking with betrayal and panic, my mother said I was being selfish, and that family supports family. "You're smart enough to figure it out," my father added, not meeting my eyes. "Bethany needs our help more than you do." That night, I sat in my childhood room, now converted to storage for Bethany's old pageant dresses and trophies, filling out loan applications until sunrise. I would eventually graduate with over $100,000 in debt, while listening to my parents complain about the price of Bethany's divorce lawyer. They told relatives I was too prideful to accept help, painting me as the difficult daughter who thought she was better than everyone. The narrative was set. Bethany was the sweet, struggling daughter who needed protection, and I was the cold, ambitious one who only cared about money. My entry into finance wasn't born from greed, as my family loved to claim, but from necessity and a burning determination to never be financially vulnerable again. Those early years were brutal in ways my family couldn't fathom, because they never asked. I slept on a cot in the office storage room, showered at the gym, and lived on ramen noodles and black coffee. While Bethany posted Instagram photos from her 3rd honeymoon funded by our parents, I was studying for my Series 7 and 66 licenses by candlelight because I couldn't afford electricity that month. My suits came from thrift stores, carefully mended and pressed to hide their age. I learned to smile through hunger pangs during client meetings, and to hide the exhaustion that threatened to consume me. Family dinners became exercises in endurance as my parents and Bethany mocked my career choices. "Money isn't everything," my mother would say while wearing the diamond necklace she'd bought with my college fund. Bethany would laugh about how I was probably too uptight to even enjoy life, while our parents nodded approvingly. When I mentioned I'd been promoted to senior analyst, my father changed the subject to Bethany's new multi-level marketing venture, praising her entrepreneurial spirit. Extended family members began avoiding me at gatherings, whispering that I made them uncomfortable with my intensity and obsession with success. The golden child syndrome in our family ran deeper than simple favoritism. It was a carefully constructed alternate reality where Bethany could do no wrong and I could do no right. Her first business venture was a bakery she opened with zero experience and a $50,000 loan from our parents. When it failed within 6 months due to her inability to wake up before noon or follow basic food safety guidelines, they blamed the location, the economy, and even me for not helping enough, though I'd been explicitly told to stay away. The boutique came next, another $40,000 gone in 4 months when Bethany decided fashion was too stressful. Then came the life coaching business, despite Bethany having no certifications, life experience, or clients. Each failure was met with more sympathy and more money, while my steady climb up the corporate ladder was dismissed as lucky breaks. Christmas of that year stands out as particularly cruel. I'd just been promoted to vice president at one of the most prestigious investment firms in the city, the youngest woman ever to hold that position. I arrived at my parents' house proud, but nervous, hoping this achievement might finally warrant some recognition. Instead, I found them gathered around Bethany, cooing over her new vision board for her next business idea, a spiritual wellness center. When I shared my news during dinner, my mother literally turned her back to me mid-sentence to ask Bethany about her chakra certification plans. The only acknowledgement came when my father suggested I should hire Bethany as my assistant since I was doing so well. When I politely declined, explaining it would be inappropriate and that Bethany had no relevant qualifications, the room erupted. I was called heartless, selfish, and accused of abandoning family values. Bethany cried on cue, and I spent the rest of the evening being lectured about the importance of lifting up family members. The situation with our maternal grandmother revealed just how far Bethany would go to maintain her position as the favored child. Grandma had always seen through the family dynamics, often slipping me $20 bills with whispered words of encouragement. She was the only one who attended my college graduation, sitting proudly in the front row with tears in her eyes. When her health began declining, I visited every weekend, bringing her favorite flowers and spending hours listening to stories of her youth. Bethany visited once a month for 15 minutes, usually while texting. Yet somehow Bethany convinced Grandma that I was only visiting for inheritance purposes, that I'd been saying horrible things about the family, that I considered myself too good for them now. Whether it was the medication or Bethany's manipulation, Grandma changed her will 6 weeks before she died. Everything went to Bethany, the house, the jewelry, even the photo albums I'd carefully organized. At the funeral, as I delivered a eulogy through tears, Bethany sat in the front row examining Grandma's ring on her finger. The marriage situations between Bethany and me became another battlefield for family loyalty and financial manipulation. When I got engaged to Daniel, a brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon I'd met at a charity gala, my parents' first reaction was that I was showing off. They refused to meet him for months, claiming he was probably arrogant and that I was betraying my roots by marrying up. When they finally agreed to dinner, they spent the entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about how simple people, like them, must bore him. Meanwhile, Bethany's engagement to Jake, who hadn't held a job in 3 years and spent his days gaming in their basement, was celebrated as a true love story. My mother gushed about how Bethany had found someone who accepted her for who she was, not for material success like some people. The wedding planning period highlighted the financial double standards that had defined our entire lives. When I approached my parents about contributing to my wedding, keeping costs modest and only asking for help with the venue deposit. They said they couldn't afford it because they were helping Bethany through her rough patch. 2 months later, they announced they were paying for Bethany's second wedding in full, including a destination ceremony in Hawaii for 100 guests. When I pointed out the hypocrisy, they accused me of being materialistic and said Daniel's family should pay since they were rich doctors. I paid for my own wedding, a beautiful but modest affair that half my family skipped to avoid taking sides. They all attended Bethany's extravaganza, posting photos with captions about family love and blessed moments. The house incident broke whatever fragile hope remained for family reconciliation. My parents had been struggling with the mortgage on our childhood home, and I offered to help with repairs in exchange for the promise that the house would eventually be mine. It wasn't about the property value, but about preserving the few happy memories I had there. I spent $50,000 renovating the kitchen, replacing the roof, and updating the electrical system. I have every receipt, every contractor agreement, every canceled check. 6 months after the renovations were complete, my parents called a family meeting. They announced they were signing the house over to Bethany immediately because she needed stability after her second divorce. When I reminded them of our agreement and showed the documentation of my investment, my mother said I was being petty about money again, and that verbal promises between family didn't need lawyers involved. Bethany sat there with a smug smile, already planning to gut the kitchen I'd carefully restored to match my memories of baking cookies with Grandma. My ascent in the financial world was fueled by a determination my family had inadvertently instilled through years of neglect and dismissal. By 32, I had become the youngest female partner in my firm's history, managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions and earning the respect of industry titans who had no idea I'd once eaten ketchup packets for dinner. My real breakthrough came when I developed a proprietary algorithm for cryptocurrency trading during my scarce free time. While my colleagues dismissed crypto as a fad, I saw patterns in the chaos, spending 18-hour days refining my models. The first million came faster than I'd imagined, a surreal moment sitting alone in my apartment watching numbers climb on my screen while my family's group chat discussed Bethany's latest MLM scheme selling essential oils. The contrast between reality and my family's perception of success reached absurd levels. My parents created elaborate social media posts celebrating Bethany's business empire when she reached the second tier in her pyramid scheme, earning roughly $200 a month while alienating every friend she'd ever had. They shared motivational quotes about supporting entrepreneur daughters and tagged Bethany as their inspiration. Meanwhile, when Forbes featured me in their 30 Under 30 list for finance with a full-page spread discussing my innovative trading strategies, not a single family member acknowledged it. A cousin later admitted my mother had told everyone I'd probably paid for the feature that magazines did that sort of thing for advertising revenue. Christmas 2019 epitomized everything wrong with our family dynamic. I arrived bearing thoughtful gifts for everyone, including a rare first edition of my mother's favorite novel I'd spent months tracking down. I watched my parents exchange excited glances as they handed Bethany a small box. Inside were keys to a brand new Mercedes, a business investment, for her to visit clients for her latest venture, a dog aromatherapy service. When it came time for my gift, my mother handed me a $25 gift card to a restaurant chain I'd mentioned disliking years ago. "We know you can afford anything you want," she said with a shrug, "so we didn't see the point in spending much." The family laughed as if this was perfectly reasonable while I sat there realizing that no success would ever be enough to earn their respect. Family reunions became exercises in public humiliation. At our annual gathering that spring, I overheard various relatives discussing how I thought I was better than everyone because I'd politely declined to invest in Bethany's latest scheme. My aunt cornered me near the dessert table to lecture about how families should support each other, clearly coached by my mother. When I tried to explain that Bethany's business had no plan, no license, and no actual service, she cut me off to say that not everything was about money and spreadsheets. The irony of being called money-obsessed by people who only contacted me when they needed loans was not lost on me. I left early after Bethany loudly announced that some people were too fancy for potato salad, now pointing at my untouched plate while the family laughed. The medical emergency that should have been a wake-up call for my family only deepened my understanding of my true place in their hearts. Acute appendicitis struck during a crucial merger negotiation, and I nearly died because I'd ignored the pain for days, not wanting to appear weak at work. Daniel found me collapsed in our kitchen and rushed me to the hospital for emergency surgery. When I woke up disoriented and in pain, he was there holding my hand, but my family was notably absent. My parents visited once, spending the entire time criticizing my workaholic lifestyle and suggesting this was karma for putting career before family. They left after 20 minutes to attend Bethany's book club, where she was presenting a vision board workshop. My mother's parting words were that I should use this time to reflect on what really mattered in life. Bethany's hospital behavior revealed a darkness I hadn't fully grasped before. She posted on social media about her poor sister in the hospital, garnering sympathy and attention while never actually visiting. Daniel later told me she'd called him while I was in surgery, not to check on my condition but to casually ask about my life insurance policies and whether he was the beneficiary. When he confronted her about the inappropriate timing, she played victim, claiming she was just worried about his future if something happened to me. She even suggested that stress from our complicated family dynamics might have caused my illness, essentially blaming me for my own medical emergency. The cryptocurrency explosion that changed my financial status from comfortable to wealthy happened while I was recovering from surgery, a poetic timing that felt like the universe's compensation for years of struggle. My algorithm had identified an emerging cryptocurrency with unique blockchain technology and undervalued market position. Against conventional wisdom, but trusting my analysis, I invested $500,000 of my accumulated savings. Over the next 18 months, I watched that investment multiply beyond my wildest calculations. By early 2023, my portfolio had swelled to $8 million. I told no one except Daniel, knowing instinctively that this information would fundamentally alter already toxic family dynamics. We quietly moved to a penthouse, upgraded our lives without ostentation, and I continued working because I loved my career, not because I needed the salary. The dichotomy of my hidden wealth and my family's continued dismissal created an almost surreal existence. At family gatherings, I bit my tongue while my parents worried aloud about their retirement funds, knowing I could solve their problems with a single transfer, but also knowing it would never end. They'd given Bethany hundreds of thousands over the years with nothing to show for it, and I'd learned that financial help without respect was just enabling. I watched Bethany manipulate them for more money for another failed business while they complained about their mortgage, and I felt nothing but exhausted sadness. The family that had taught me I was worthless had inadvertently created someone who understood value in ways they never could. Uncle Theodore's death came as a shock to everyone except perhaps himself. A tech pioneer who'd built his empire from a garage startup to a billion-dollar company, he'd always been the family's enigma, attending gatherings sparingly but observing everything with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. While others saw him as eccentric and distant, I knew him through years of late-night emails where he mentored me in business and life with a wisdom born from his own struggles. His messages always arrived when I needed them most, offering strategic advice disguised as casual observations. The heart attack took him at his desk, working on code at 73, exactly how he would have wanted to go. The family's assumptions about his will revealed their true colors in vivid detail. Within hours of his death, Bethany was already spending his money in her mind, discussing with our parents which of his properties she'd keep and which she'd sell. She posted grief-stricken selfies on social media while researching yacht prices on her phone. My parents began planning their early retirement, confident that Theodore would take care of family, and that Bethany, as the one who needed it most, would receive the bulk of his estate. Extended family members suddenly remembered how close they'd been to him, sharing fabricated stories of their deep connection to the man they'd mocked for years as the weird uncle who preferred computers to people. The will reading was scheduled at the law offices of Morrison Klein and Associates, a pristine building that intimidated my family with its marble floors and hushed efficiency. I attended out of respect for Theodore, expecting nothing and sitting quietly in the back while Bethany commanded center stage. She'd worn what she probably thought looked appropriately mournful but expensive, a black dress that was too short, and jewelry she'd charged to credit cards in anticipation of her windfall. My parents flanked her protectively, shooting me occasional glares as if my mere presence might somehow diminish Bethany's inheritance. The extended family filled the remaining seats, vultures circling what they assumed would be their feast. Mr. Morrison, the executor, was everything Uncle Theodore would have chosen: precise, unflappable, and immune to emotional manipulation. He began reading the will in a monotone that gave no hints to its contents. The small bequests came first: donations to MIT, his alma mater, technology museums, coding camps for underprivileged youth. The family shifted restlessly, impatient for the real distribution to begin. Then came the moment that shattered their carefully constructed expectations. To my grandniece, Marilyn Sinclair, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets totaling approximately $8 million. The silence was deafening for exactly 3 seconds before Bethany's scream shattered it. The letter Theodore had attached to the will was read despite Bethany's hysterics and my parents' demands to stop. Marilyn, it began, you are the only one in this family who understands that wealth is earned through innovation, persistence, and sacrifice. I've watched you build yourself from nothing while surrounded by those who would tear you down. Your trading algorithm impressed me not because of its success, but because you created it while working full-time, studying constantly, and receiving no support. I've seen how you've been treated, overlooked for the golden child who produces nothing but drama and debt. This inheritance isn't charity or favoritism. It's an investment in someone who has already proven they know how to multiply value. Use it to build something magnificent. And remember, the best revenge against those who dismissed you is a life so well lived, they can't touch it. The eruption that followed was volcanic. Bethany lunged across the conference table, screaming that I'd manipulated a sick old man, that I'd poisoned him against the family, that the money was rightfully hers. My parents demanded to see previous versions of the will, insisting there had been a mistake or fraud. When Mr. Morrison calmly explained that Theodore had been of sound mind and had actually videotaped himself signing this will to prevent such challenges, they turned on me with venom I'd never seen before. My mother accused me of secretly visiting Theodore, of turning him against his real family, of being a gold digger who preyed on elderly relatives. The irony of being called a gold digger by people who'd spent decades draining money from anyone willing to give it was staggering. The family meeting my parents orchestrated the following week was ambush disguised as reconciliation. They'd told me they wanted to discuss the situation calmly to find a solution that worked for everyone. I arrived to find not just immediate family, but cousins, aunts, uncles, and even some plus ones I'd never met before. It was an intervention staged to pressure me into surrendering my inheritance. Bethany had prepared a presentation complete with printed slides showing her debts, failed businesses, and monthly expenses. She cried on cue while describing how she'd been counting on this money to finally make something of herself. My parents presented their own financial struggles, conveniently omitting the hundreds of thousands they'd given Bethany over the years. The collective entitlement in that room was suffocating. Each person had a reason why they deserved Theodore's money more than I did. A cousin needed IVF treatments. An aunt wanted to open a restaurant. My parents deserved a comfortable retirement after raising 2 daughters. The assumption that I would simply hand over millions to solve everyone's self-created problems while receiving nothing but their continued disrespect was breathtaking. They'd prepared contracts, actually brought legal documents for me to sign away portions of my inheritance to various family members. When I asked why I should give money to people who had never supported me, who had actively mocked my success and dismissed my struggles, the room erupted in accusations of selfishness and cruelty. My exit from that meeting was the first time I'd ever stood up to my entire family at once. I looked at each of their expectant, entitled faces and spoke the truth they'd never wanted to hear. I told them about sleeping in my office, about choosing between food and textbooks, about missing my own graduation dinner because no one bothered to show up. I reminded them of every cruel joke, every dismissive comment, every time they'd chosen Bethany's wants over my needs. I told them that Uncle Theodore had seen what they refused to see, that I had built my success despite them, not because of them. And then I said the words that would echo through every family gathering thereafter. I don't owe you anything. Theodore left me this money because he knew I was the only one who wouldn't waste it. And I'm keeping every penny. The silence as I walked out was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Bethany's social media campaign against me began within hours of the family meeting, a coordinated attack designed to destroy my reputation and pressure me into submission. She posted tearful videos claiming I had stolen her inheritance, that Uncle Theodore had promised her everything in private conversations, that I had manipulated a vulnerable elderly man in his final years. The lies escalated quickly from misleading to completely fabricated. According to her posts, I had prevented the family from visiting. Theodore had poisoned him against Bethany, had even suggested forging documents. She created a GoFundMe titled, "Help Me Fight for My Stolen Inheritance," complete with childhood photos of her with Theodore and fictional stories of their close relationship. The page raised $3,000 in 2 days from sympathetic strangers who had no idea they were funding a con artist. The recruitment of extended family into her harassment campaign showed Bethany's manipulative skills at their peak. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly began calling and texting, alternating between guilt trips and threats. They shared Bethany's posts with added commentary about family loyalty and the evil of greed. My inbox filled with messages ranging from disappointed lectures to outright hostility. One cousin suggested I was probably responsible for Theodore's death, timing it to maximize my benefit. Another threatened to expose my true nature to my employer. The family phone tree once used for holiday planning became a network for coordinating attacks on my character and peace of mind. The identity theft discovery came through a fraud alert on my phone at 2 a.m. Someone had attempted to open 3 credit cards using my social security number and previous addresses. As I worked with the fraud department, a sick certainty grew in my stomach. The applications included details only family would know: my middle name, my first apartment address, even my old student loan account numbers. Confronting Bethany was pointless. She denied everything while smirking, knowing I couldn't prove it was her. When I told my parents I was filing a police report, they exploded. My mother screamed that I was destroying the family over money, that Bethany was desperate and made a mistake, that I should have compassion for my struggling sister. My father said if I proceeded with charges, I would be dead to them. I filed the report anyway. The workplace harassment escalated beyond anything I could have anticipated. Bethany didn't just show up at my office. She staged dramatic scenes designed for maximum damage. She arrived during a crucial client meeting, bursting into the conference room, claiming to be my sister with a family emergency. As security escorted her out, she screamed about family money and abandonment loud enough for every partner to hear. She contacted my CEO directly, sending a carefully crafted email full of half-truths and complete fabrications, suggesting I had stolen family money to make my initial investments, that my success was built on fraud. She even implied I might be embezzling from the firm, providing fake evidence she'd manufactured. I had to hire a lawyer and provide years of documentation to clear my name, while whispers followed me through the halls for months. The stalking took darker turns when Bethany somehow obtained my new address and began appearing at all hours. Daniel found her going through our mail. Security cameras caught her trying to access the building's package room. She hired a private investigator to follow me, looking for hidden assets or anything she could use as leverage. The investigator thankfully quit after realizing he was being used for harassment, and actually warned me about Bethany's increasingly unstable behavior. She'd paid him to find evidence that I was hiding millions more, convinced that Theodore must have left me more than the will stated. When he found nothing because there was nothing to find, she accused him of being bought off by me. The fake reconciliation dinner was masterfully orchestrated manipulation. My mother called crying, claiming she'd been too harsh, that family was more important than money, that they wanted to start fresh. She said my father had reflected on their favoritism and wanted to apologize. Against my better judgment and Daniel's warnings, I agreed to meet them at a neutral restaurant. I arrived to find not just my parents, but also Bethany, a lawyer, and a financial advisor. The table was already covered with documents. Before I could leave, my mother grabbed my arm, crying that they just wanted to help me manage the inheritance properly. The lawyer began explaining how I could set up trusts for family members, how it would benefit everyone tax-wise. Bethany recorded everything on her phone, waiting for me to say something she could twist into agreement or admission. The documents they wanted me to sign were breathtaking in their audacity. Not only did they want me to sign over half the inheritance to Bethany immediately, but they also wanted power of attorney to manage the remainder. They'd actually created a conservatorship petition ready to file, if I agreed, essentially declaring me incompetent to handle my own finances. The financial advisor, clearly uncomfortable, kept trying to explain that this was family helping family. When I laughed at the absurdity, Bethany exploded, screaming that I was mentally unstable, that my reaction proved I needed help. She'd been recording, hoping for this exact response, planning to use it as evidence of my instability. The other diners stared as she performed her breakdown, playing the victim, while I sat there amazed at the lengths they would go to steal what they'd never earned. The country club confrontation was inevitable, the final battle in a war I'd never wanted to fight. The annual family reunion was scheduled for the club's main ballroom, and I'd initially planned to skip it entirely. But I'd realized Bethany still had our grandmother's ring, the one piece of inheritance that was legally mine according to Grandma's handwritten note I'd recently found. I arrived late, hoping to speak with Bethany privately and leave quickly. Instead, I walked into what appeared to be a planned presentation. Bethany stood at the front of the room with a laptop and projector, addressing the gathered relatives like she was delivering a TED Talk on family betrayal and mental illness. The presentation she'd prepared was a masterclass in manipulation and lies. She'd created slides showing fabricated email exchanges where I supposedly threatened her doctored text messages suggesting I was having a mental breakdown, and cherry-picked partial conversations taken completely out of context. She'd titled her presentation, "Loving Through Mental Illness, My Sister's Story," and spoke with practiced tears about watching her beloved sister descend into paranoid delusions about money. According to her narrative, my success had driven me insane. Theodore had left her the money, but I'd somehow tricked the lawyers, and she was only trying to help me get the treatment I needed. The extended family ate it up, nodding sympathetically while shooting me concerned glances. My phone had been recording in my pocket from the moment I entered, a habit I'd developed after the fake reconciliation dinner. When Bethany finished her presentation and called for the family to support an intervention, I stood up, slowly pulling out my laptop from my bag. I had come prepared for this possibility, carrying years of evidence I'd hoped never to use. "Since we're sharing family truths today," I said calmly, "let me add some actual facts to this fiction." The room tensed as I connected my laptop to the projector, overriding Bethany's presentation with my own. What followed was the systematic destruction of every lie my family had built about me. The emails I showed first were between Bethany and various family members plotting to contest the will before it was even read. Screenshots of her researching how to break a will and mental incompetence claims dated from before Theodore's death. Then came the recorded conversations where she admitted to taking Grandma's jewelry while she was hospitalized, where my parents discussed how to guilt me into paying for Bethany's debts, where Bethany bragged about making me look unstable. I played the voicemail where she threatened to ruin my career if I didn't give her money. The security footage of her trying to break into my apartment. The confession from the private investigator she'd hired. Years of receipts showing my parents taking my college fund for Bethany's wedding while telling relatives I'd refused their help. The revelation about my cryptocurrency fortune was the final blow to their narrative. I showed my trading history, the algorithm development timestamps, proving I'd built it while working 18-hour days, the investment growth that had nothing to do with Theodore's money. I revealed that I'd already donated $1 million to charity in Grandma's name, specifically to organizations supporting overlooked children in dysfunctional families. The room was silent except for Bethany's increasingly frantic attempts to interrupt, calling the evidence fake, screaming that I'd manipulated everything. Several cousins who'd harassed me for months looked sick as they realized they'd been pawns in Bethany's scheme. The family fracture that followed was swift and decisive. An aunt who'd always been neutral stood up first, apologizing for believing lies without questioning them. Two cousins followed, admitting they'd been promised money by Bethany for supporting her. The room divided like the Red Sea, those capable of admitting they'd been wrong, and those doubling down on denial. My parents, faced with irrefutable evidence of their favoritism and manipulation, chose the path they'd always taken. My mother accused me of destroying the family. My father said I was vindictive and cruel, and together they publicly disowned me in front of everyone. Bethany, realizing she'd lost control, began throwing things, screaming threats about lawsuits and revenge until security arrived to escort her out. The legal aftermath was swift and satisfying in its finality. My lawyers, who'd been documenting everything for months, served Bethany with a cease and desist order that itemized every threat, every defamatory post, every attempted crime. The restraining order was granted immediately based on the stalking evidence and recorded threats. The identity theft charges moved forward despite my parents' attempts to interfere, resulting in Bethany's arrest and eventual plea deal that included probation and mandated mental health treatment. My parents hired a discount lawyer to contest Theodore's will, claiming undue influence and mental incapacity. The judge dismissed the case in less than 20 minutes, noting that their evidence was fabricated, defamatory, and bordered on criminal harassment of the beneficiary. They were ordered to pay my legal fees. The healing journey that followed the family explosion was harder than any corporate climb or financial struggle I'd ever faced. Years of therapy helped me understand that I'd spent my entire life seeking validation from people incapable of providing it, chasing the love of parents who'd decided my worth before I could walk. My therapist helped me recognize that my drive for success, while ultimately beneficial, had been fueled by a desperate need to prove I mattered. Learning to find worth within myself, rather than in achievements or bank balances, was a daily practice that challenged everything I'd believed about identity and value. Daniel was my anchor through it all, loving me through the anger phase, the grief phase, and the eventual acceptance that my biological family would never be what I needed them to be. Building a chosen family became my greatest achievement, worth more than any algorithm or inheritance. Colleagues who'd watched the drama unfold from the sidelines stepped forward with support I hadn't known existed. Friends I'd kept at arm's length, afraid they'd judge me for my toxic family, became the siblings I'd never had. We created new holiday traditions free from criticism and manipulation. Sunday dinners at our penthouse filled with laughter instead of tension, celebrations where achievements were genuinely celebrated and struggles were met with support instead of exploitation. I learned that family isn't about shared DNA, but about shared respect, mutual support, and unconditional acceptance of each other's authentic selves. The scholarship fund I established for overlooked siblings in dysfunctional families became my way of transforming pain into purpose. Every month I read applications from young people whose stories echoed mine, the responsible child ignored, while parents poured resources into a troubled sibling, the high achiever dismissed as fine. While drama commanded attention, the child who learned that love in their family was transactional and always flowed toward chaos. The fund didn't just provide money for education. It included therapy resources, mentorship programs, and most importantly, validation that their struggles were real and their dreams valid. Watching these students flourish without family support reminded me daily that success isn't about proving others wrong, but about proving yourself right. Updates about my biological family came through the grapevine despite our estrangement. My parents lost their house to foreclosure after spending their remaining savings on lawyers trying to contest a will they had no grounds to challenge. they moved in with Bethany, whose marriage to Jake had imploded when the possibility of inheritance money disappeared. He'd apparently been enduring her chaos only for the potential payday. Bethany's social media transformed from luxury aspirations to vague posts about persecution and jealousy, her follower count dwindling as people realized her victim narrative was manufactured. Extended family members occasionally reached out with updates disguised as olive branches testing whether time had softened my boundaries. It hadn't. My business expanded internationally, built on principles of recognizing and nurturing overlooked talent. I specifically sought out employees who'd been dismissed by previous employers as too quiet or not leadership material, often finding brilliant minds that simply didn't fit traditional corporate molds. The company culture emphasized merit over personality, results over politics, and collaboration over competition. We became known as the firm where introverts could become leaders, where past struggles informed future strategies, and where family drama stayed outside the office doors. The algorithm that started it all evolved into a suite of financial tools that democratized trading strategies previously available only to elite investors. The freedom from toxic family dynamics revealed itself in unexpected ways. My health improved dramatically without the constant stress of managing their emotions and expectations. Holidays became joyful rather than dreaded. I could announce achievements without bracing for dismissal, share struggles without fear of exploitation, and simply exist without performing whatever role they'd assigned me. Daniel and I traveled to places I dreamed of while sleeping in that office storage room, experiencing the world without guilt about spending money they felt entitled to. We donated generously but strategically, supporting causes that mattered rather than enabling destructive patterns. Looking back from my position of financial security and emotional freedom, I see the painful irony in my family's behavior. They spent so much energy trying to tear down the one person who could have helped them, so much time dismissing the child who would have gladly shared her success if they'd shown her basic respect. Their favoritism toward Bethany created two daughters incapable of healthy relationships. One who believed she was entitled to everything without effort, and one who believed she deserved nothing regardless of achievement. The $8 million from Theodore wasn't what made me wealthy. It was learning that my worth existed independently of their validation. The money just made it easier to maintain the boundaries that saved my life. Standing here now in my penthouse watching the city lights twinkle below, I think about that 8-year-old girl eating a store-bought cupcake alone on her birthday. I wish I could tell her that one day she'd have more than she ever imagined, not just financially, but emotionally. That the family who made her feel worthless would reveal their true colors so dramatically that walking away would feel like freedom rather than loss. That she'd build a life so beautiful they couldn't touch it with their toxicity. Blood doesn't make family. Love, respect, and support do. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is showing their true nature so clearly that leaving becomes the only option. Money revealed truths that were always there, hidden under social niceties and familial obligations. It didn't change my family. It exposed them. $8 million showed me that their love had always been conditional. Their support, always transactional. Their loyalty always aimed toward whoever they thought could benefit them most. I spent 36 years trying to be seen by people who chose to be blind. Now I see myself, and that's enough. The inheritance they'll never touch gave me something worth more than money. The freedom to stop seeking approval from those incapable of giving it. And that more than any number in my bank account is true wealth. What would you do if your family only saw your worth when dollar signs appeared? Have you ever had to choose between blood relations and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and finding your own worth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their value isn't determined by their family's recognition. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the best revenge against those who dismissed you is living a life so magnificent they become irrelevant to your happiness.